So how do you create a team of salespeople that are self-motivated, able to generate their own opportunities, and create raving advocates of your customers so that your customers are coming back to you to see that you're a trusted advisor in their community, that you're able to help them provide a solution and a phenomenal experience? Well, I have Jonathan Dawson, the owner and leader of Sellchology, a training organization for the automotive space, although he does also work outside of automotive. He and I have a great conversation today. You're going to be really excited. He breaks down how he trains the salespeople to generate opportunities, how to systematize their day, what you as a leader need to provide for your dealership in order to make sure it's maximizing its value. Phenomenal conversation. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Again, Jonathan Dawson, let's dive in. All right, Jonathan, it's about time. I've known you for a long time, and we just were joking about this. I can't believe it's taken this long to get you here, because I really do feel that you are really one of the leaders of training individuals, not just in automotive, because I know you work primarily in automotive, but what I think what you talk about, how your approach to sales is a little different than most trainers or their approach in automotive, because your focus really is understanding the psychology of the customer, which again, Sellchology as the name of your organization, your company. And as I said to you before we jumped on, sometimes I think people just think of that as a catchy, way to talk about what you do. But the reality, when I've seen you and I've sat through your sessions and I've watched you coach and I've watched you teach this, for me, it's crystal clear. So what I'd like to chat with you about is, how did you get there? Like, how did that start? Because I know you were a salesperson, not sort of successful in the beginning, and I'd love to hear your story for the audience as well. But how did you land on this? What is it? And then we'll get into how it really applies to help people become successful salespeople.
Well, thank you for that, Glenn. Thanks for the opportunity and invitation. Yeah, so Sellchology, selling through psychology, was essentially born out of frustration. It was like many inventions, if you will, or many innovations. It's born out of like, why does this have to be so hard? It shouldn't
Right.
have to be hard. And so I got to rewind the clock a little bit to give you some backstory or context. But generally speaking, if I just try to look at categories of methods, I'm going to make a distinction that I think is a generalization, but it's a fair one. That a lot of training falls into two major categories or groups of a way of approaching solving this development thing that we're trying to do called training teams or training people. So, category number one, I'm going to call the process approach. What's the process approach? You have somebody who says, hey, listen, here are my steps, here are my scripts. And if you'll just follow my process, if you'll do it my way, I will tell you it works. And you just have to repeat after me and do it exactly the way I tell you. And here's the steps, and here's the scripts, and here's my process, and just adopt my process. Now, obviously, anyone in any operational role knows that process is important. So then a trainer will come in and say, just do it this way. If I swing the pendulum from that side over here, this process approach, I swing it over here, and what you end up seeing a lot, and sometimes online, is what I call personality approach to training.
Right.
Their philosophy is different. They go, listen, the secret sauce to success is you got to walk like me and talk like me and look like me and act like me. And if you were just me and not you, you'd be successful like me. And it's what I call maybe the charismatic approach to training.
Right.
And it's about their charisma, their charm, and it's about their personality. And these two approaches I found frustrating, because even as a new salesperson in the car dealership, I actually had two managers, one of each school of thought. So I had the one manager that essentially was a bully. He was militaristic about it. He just wanted me to just do it exactly as he said. So when I would come to the sales tower, he would load my lips and he'd say, John, go say this.
Right.
I'd take two steps, and two floor tiles later, I would essentially mess it up.
Mm-hmm.
I would in my head go, I don't want to say it just like that because I don't think the customer, and I would land down at my desk and I would do my version of what he told me to say. And of course it didn't work. And I'd bounce back up and I'd come up to the sales tower and he'd say, "Did you say exactly what I told you to say?" And I'd go, kind of.
Right. Sort of,
He goes,
kind of, maybe.
"Why don't you just do it my way?" And it's because in my gut, my heart, and my soul, I could not just say what he was telling me to say. It
Right.
just made sense to my soul. So then I had this other manager, and he was a legitimate musician. He was a drummer. He was an artist. So he was all about winging it. He was all about, you'll figure it out. You just got to find your groove. And so when I'd come to him for help, he's like, "Oh man, John, it's not that hard. Don't overcomplicate things. You just got to make a friend, make a friend, sell a car." I'm like, yeah, what does that mean? I don't even know
Right.
what to do.
Right. Right. Right.
So Sellchology was rooted in my actual origin of sales, which is when I was 17 years old, I became a door-to-door salesperson. And so from 17 to 22, for 5 years, I did door-to-door sales. But also, not only did I do door-to-door sales, but I was so good at the methodology I had developed as a salesperson that I actually, at 18 years old, became a trainer for the company. And so eventually, over the years of training entire teams of door-to-door salespeople, we had like 60 something sales reps across several states. And I, at 18, 19, 20, I was the trainer of the how to get people to let you in their home. And so when I got the car business, even though I had been successful in door-to-door sales, and even though I had been successful at teaching others how to do door-to-door sales, my owner, who was the general manager, told me very plainly on day one, "I don't care what you've done, the car business is different, and you're going to do it
Right.
our way.
Right. Right. Right.
Here's the
Right.
road to the sale, and you just have to learn this and do this way." So my first couple months, you know, I really struggled. I struggled with the methodologies of the road to the sale. I struggled with the approach I was being taught to do. To me, it seemed very confrontational. I was always confused by this, Glenn. And just imagine for a moment this. I'm a customer thinking of buying a shiny new car.
Right.
I mean, there's only so many things that categorically go into that like dream list of things. You're buying a new car, the new
Mm-hmm.
car smell, right? There's something about a new car in American society. We just love buying, a new car.
Sure.
I want one. I'm excited about one. So here's me over here as a customer, excited to go buy a car. Over here, the manager hired a reasonably nice, decent human being called a car salesman. And in the interview, when this manager hired this person, they sat across from them and like, "I think you'll make it. Why? Because you're an easy person to talk to. You seem like a nice person. I think you've got some good, you're going to make it." So you have a decent human being over here who's just genuinely wanting to help. You have over here a decent human being who just genuinely wants to buy a car. Both of them are excited to make it happen. And when they collide, it's like, why is there so much tension and conflict and resistance in the process? So Sellchology, in the beginning of my career as a car salesman, was born out of like, this just doesn't work for me. So instead of trying to memorize the steps and scripts and process of my manager, which I just felt was not really appropriate to any individual customer, and instead of trying to be like my other manager, I was not going to act like him, I said, I'm going to go back to my roots. In door to door sales, when I would knock on a door, what I was looking for door to door was I was looking for a pattern of what I could anticipate from the customer. So I documented my steps as a salesperson and I tracked what was the questions they asked, what were the objections they gave me, what was the resistance point, what were the things that were happening. I recorded my conversations, I logged the things. So I developed what I'm now referring to as a pattern of anticipation. I could begin to anticipate certain things because human beings, generally speaking, fall into certain patterns. That's why a field like psychology can even exist. I mean, if people did not fall into certain patterns of behavior, we'd be just studying chaos. There's no such thing as
Right.
psychology.
Right.
So with that background information, when you kind of think of it and say, well, listen, every customer is different, but they're all different in the same ways. Categorically, there's behavioral patterns. So I went back kind of to the drawing board and I said, no, I'm going to figure out a different way. And all I did is pay attention to the most common things that happened when I was with a customer on the lot. What are the questions they asked? What are the objections they gave? What are the resistance points? What are the sticking points? When does the sale go a little cattywampus on me? And I just documented those things. And then I said, okay, if this, then that. So if this, then that, what if I get before the this and change the this so that it won't become the that? How do I anticipate my clients' potential needs, wants, objections, and desires?
So you start, again, to clarify for the audience, what it sounds like is I've watched enough patterns. I can see you're heading down the pattern. I'm going to presumptively ask you something before you ask the question, which stops. Then and again, I know some sales trainers will say, well, see, now I have control,
Oh
but
God, it's not about that at all.
I know. That's why I
Yeah,
wanted to clarify, because I could just hear the audience going, oh, now Jonathan has control of that customer,
it's
but it's
terrible.
not.
Yeah, I know.
It's just, it's breaking that pattern, almost like shocking when somebody, like, you hear a noise, you turn your head and you completely forgot where you were locked on.
Yeah. So in Sellchology, the terminology that I put a label to that is called pattern interruption. Pattern interruption is to do something intentionally on purpose, right? To break the pattern of thought, to be able to introduce a new idea or emotion. So in what you're describing there, which I thank you for identifying that. A lot of training is about control, and my managers used to say that all the time. John, you need to get control of your customer. You need to get strong. Stop being
Right.
so.
Right.
And I just hated that. I just hated that vocabulary. Like, I don't want to control anybody. This shouldn't have to be like that. So to me, it's the difference between, for example, now I've been married for 24 years, right? My wife and I have been best friends for 29 years. If I choose to get my wife flowers, right, I can order her right now a bouquet of red roses. Now, obviously, in general, my wife will generally appreciate getting flowers, and she'll generally appreciate red roses over anything. But those aren't her actual favorite flower. That's not actually what she wants to get, right? So when I then willingly, knowingly, through anticipation, through understanding and empathy, choose on purpose to get her the flower that she would appreciate the most, is that appreciating my wife or is that manipulating my wife? Well, I guess a case could be made for it's both, but really, what is it? Well, appreciation is based on the other person, manipulation is based on yourself. So, what is your intention? Is your intention to control people? Then you're going to look for ways to manipulate people.
So I
If
want
you're,
to stop on that, because that's something I think we need to make sure people. I always like rest stop here. I hope you got it, because in that example of the flowers, my brain just saw the picture you talked about. If I'm buying the flowers for her and now that makes her happy because I know it is, and off it goes and she's happy, versus I'm getting her the flowers because I want her to feel a certain way because now I want something from her,
yeah,
right? That becomes the manipulation point. And so that's where I want to clarify that for people, is that when you're doing something, anticipating something, it's to clarify for them or help them versus, aha, I got them now, going back to that, got to
yeah,
control them, John.
yeah, exactly. So obviously, look, the case could be made. Well, John, did you get her those flowers because you did something stupid and you're trying to get her to soften up to you? Maybe. Um, but if you're just doing it for that reason, now you're just manipulating your wife.
Right.
So when you're with a client, when you're trying to, with your prospective customer, and you're trying to build a relationship, if you're simply doing the steps just to get them to follow you, just so you can sell them a car, that transactional mentality may in fact create the result of the sale. But what you will not create is a raving fan advocate. What you will not create is a loyal client. What you will not create is a referral generating machine. A lot of salespeople, I think the reason they're stuck, and sales teams generally plateau at a level significantly below their potential, is because they have a transactional mentality and a transactional process. Everything about the way they talk is transactional. It's
Right.
all quantity. How many units did you sell? What's your close ratio? What's your gross profit? What's your PVR? It's all quantity. There's no qualitative component to what they're thinking about. So with Sellchology, the approach started with this frustration. Like, I don't want to just do that. I want to build a meaningful connection while solving a meaningful problem, or meeting a need in a meaningful way. I want to actually serve people through the way that I'm selling them whatever I'm selling them. So because of that, psychology became about patterns, principles, and psychology. And instead of process or personality, it's about patterns, principles, and psychology. And it's mostly customer centric or empathetic selling. So the kind of buzzwords that I use a lot when I'm talking about this to sales teams, I say, look, you want to learn how to be anticipatory and empathetic at the same time. And in fact, actually, anticipation is an indication of empathy. Like, if you can accurately anticipate what somebody's thinking, it's because you've at least mentally put yourself in their position. And the simplest version of this that everyone can relate to some degree is imagine that Glenn comes into town and I decide to take him to a restaurant. I say, hey, there's this new place I heard about. It just opened up. Let's go check it out. We walk in, the ambiance is great. And we're like, wow, there's a good vibe to the place. There's good
Right.
artistic stuff on the wall. It's kind of got a cool entry. And we're standing there and we notice that the person at the greeting station sees us, but they're looking down at their screen a little bit. They look up, smile, look down at the screen a little bit. And after just, maybe a minute or two of just kind of appreciating the foyer, we kind of look, we say, excuse me, hi, could we get a seat? And they go, oh yeah, of course, absolutely. Let me get you guys seated. And they walk us over and set us down. We're now at our table and we're enjoying the ambiance. There's good vibe. There's good music playing. We're like, well, this is nice. And then after sitting there for a minute, we kind of look at each other and go, I don't think we have menus yet. So we flag someone down and say, hey, excuse me, could we get some menus? They go, oh, absolutely. Let me get you some menus. And they hand us menus. We're looking at the menus a few minutes. Whoa, good pricing, good photos. It looks like it's, good descriptions.
Right.
After a couple minutes, you go, has anybody checked in on us for, no, hey, excuse me, could we get some drinks? And they say, oh, absolutely. If that continued throughout the night, if you had to flag them down for a drink, and then you had to flag them down to take the order, then you had to flag them down to get you a refill, then you had to flag them down to ask about the dessert. If every single time you asked for something, they politely and professionally and kindly said absolutely and got it for you, we would still walk out and say, the service there was weird. Why?
Right.
Why would we even call the service bad? If they were polite and nice and kind and professional in responding to every request, we would still call it bad service. Why? Because there was no anticipation.
Right.
They didn't anticipate we need menus and offer them. They didn't anticipate our drink order, or they didn't anticipate our refill. So there's something about the human brain that responds really well to anticipatory service versus obligatory service.
Yes.
Obligatory service is being obliged to. It's like you asked me for something and now I have to give it to you. Anticipatory service is anticipating the need and introducing it. And that became the foundation of Sellchology as a philosophy. It's how can we, through empathy, anticipate the customer because, oh, by the way, this isn't my first rodeo. I've done this before. I've helped the person buy a car before. There is a pattern to this. And so instead of overcoming objections, instead of rebuttals and handling objections, I just said, no. We're going to have a completely different way. And we reverse engineered the customer experience so we don't have to deal with that nonsense.
No, and I like that. I mean, I came from hospitality, and so I was taught early on that if somebody sat, the host sat someone, it could be a minute before you went over to the table. It would feel like 10 minutes. But if I went over and said, I'll be right with you, they would sit for 10 minutes, theoretically, and say, well, they recognize me. But it also touched on something that you said earlier about how you came to this, because what dawned on me when you said obligatory service, it's not even sometimes obligatory service, that's part of it, but my mind also went to this, I serve everyone the same way, which goes back to your process. It doesn't matter who you are. I do these 10 steps, do these 10 steps. And the person sometimes feels awkward. They're getting service, but they feel, well, this is not really designed for me. I'm following your lead. You're not following my lead as the customer. And I think that's really a big difference from what you're saying. So taking it a step further, when you go in now and you work with a lot of dealerships and a lot of teams, and you host a lot of conferences also at your Pinnacle Center in Atlanta for training, and you bring people in. When you go in, they're obviously bringing you in for some reason.
Yeah.
What's one or two of the things that, like, where's the disconnect from that you're seeing, that you're being able to go, well, they're that, or that's the reason why? What are you seeing? Why is it still frustrating for teams and they're reaching out to you? What are you running across?
So there's a few things to that. So I would start by saying that if you're at a dealership right now and you look across your sales floor, and for now I'm going to use it just kind of a standardization number
Sure.
here, that NADA average floats somewhere around 10, 11 cars per person per month depending on the geography, the brand, and so forth, location. But it's somewhere in that range. And that's historically been the expectation. If you have that, I would just start by asking you as a leadership team, as a manager or GM, GSM, whoever's watching this, if that's the national average and your store is anywhere near there, there's an accusation built into that number, your average.
Right.
And I want to backtrack a little bit to tell you a story that will tie into your question. A few years back, I got a call from a general sales manager, and he said to me, "Hey, John, one of my top people who's been following you for a while just joined your Pinnacle Society." And briefly, the society, for those you don't know, it's like a mastermind for super high achieving, top performing salespeople, right? So some of the top salespeople across the country are members of this mastermind. And this salesman individually found out about it, and joined. He's selling 20, 25 cars a month at the time. So after a couple of months of being in the mastermind, the salesman tells his GSM, "Hey, boss, I really think you're going to like this guy who's one of the coaches there, and I think you're going to love his approach. You should talk to him." So I get a call from the GSM. The GSM says to me, he says, "John, so listen, we've been on this other program for a long time, and I'm not really wanting to change because I like the program. It's been a good program for us, and I'm comfortable with it. But my top guy seems to think you're the deal. So here's what I want to know. First question is, this store has never sold over 100 cars in its 30-year history in a single month. It's never had a 100-car month ever." He said, "My first goal is I want to know, before I retire from my role, can you help me get to 100 cars? I want to hire 5 more guys. We have 5 now. I want to hire 5 more guys. I want to get to 100 cars, and I want to know if that's something you will help me do." And I said, "No, sir, I will not do that for you." He said, "Why not? What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you just said you want to have 5 guys more, so you have 10 to get to 100. I said, I'm not interested in that." He says, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "I want to get you to 100 with just 5. And he says, "But national average is NADA average has always been, 10 cars per person. I mean, I'm 20 groups. I know. I mean, it takes, you just have to play the numbers." I said, "Sir, I'm going to say back to you what you just said to me, because I want you to hear your own thoughts expressed by someone else. What you just asked me is, you said, 'Hey, sir, I'd like you to hire me 5 more people so I can have a team of 10 so I can get to 100 because the national average is 10 per person. I'd like you to help me build an average team. Is that because you're an average manager?' Is what I asked him. He went, whoa. He said, "No, that's not what I meant at all." I said, "Because that's what you said." So to answer the question, why do people who bring me in, why do they bring me in? A lot of times because they know in their gut there's something next. They know there's a next level. They know there's a potential that's untapped, but they genuinely don't actually know what really they should be doing different, because most of us operate from our own frame of reference, right? I'm doing the best I can with what I think I know to do.
Right.
And it's, you hit this threshold or this plateau and you just go, I'm kind of stuck and I don't really know how to unstuck myself. Or I have these salespeople who are stuck and I don't know how to unstuck them. You have somebody on your team who's been there for 5 years, who sells 12 cars a month. When was the first time they hit 12? 5 years ago.
Right.
5 years, they've improved all of 0. Like, at some point, you have to audit yourself and even accuse yourself and say, what am I doing as a leader? Right? You're in charge. Now what? Okay. What are you doing as a leader that your team is so comfortable stagnating?
But do you think that's, again, when I hear that, it goes back to what that gentleman said, is that I just have to get to my number.
Yeah.
Right. And versus individual.
Yes. What is
development instead of individual. And I just had a conversation with John Traver from Traver Connect. And he talked about that same thing, is that it should be about personal development,
yes,
which then allows the team to grow, which allows the business to grow. But what we do is reverse. We have to hit our, to your point, 100. Well, let me see, that's 12 people. Well, we need at least 8 people. I got 5. I have to go hire 3 versus, well, why can't I get them to do? But that's a different thinking, because as you said earlier, I'm at my 20 group and we all talk about the same thing. NADA tells us all the same things. And it's hard to, one, know who to trust to think outside of the box, or can I even do that? It really takes someone to, like you're saying, a come to Jesus moment, to look in the mirror and say, I think saying I don't know how is probably one of the most liberating things.
absolutely.
But then the next important step is, where do I go find this information?
Yeah, well, let me go back to what you just commented that NADA says is, look, the data is the data, right? So
Yeah,
here's the data is the national average is this. That is the average. The nature, though, of a mathematical average is someone's above it and someone's below it, which makes it the average. The
exactly.
question you should be asking is, what is the outlier doing?
Yeah. Who's
How do I
above?
build it?
Who's above and
Yeah,
do I know them?
yeah, thanks. And that's what I told this gentleman. I said, you should have asked a different question. You should have, instead of telling me what the national average is, you should have said, John, you work with outliers. Help me build an outlier team. Let me screw up the average for everyone else. Now, the punchline of that story is last month, they sold 159 cars with 5 people. And in fact, their top salesperson actually did more in volume last month than the entire store's volume when they started with me. So, and they just hired that 5th person recently, but they normally sell like 140 cars with 4 people. And the same store that thought they needed to get to 10 to get to 100 was able to hit 100 with 4.
Right.
And the reality is, most of you who are watching this, if you're in a management role, your people have so much more potential. Even your top people, your best salesperson on your floor is realistically, and I will put my reputation behind this statement, 30% of their actual potential. Your top person is barely at 30%. And so your whole store could level up exponentially, but they need what you just said, this individual customized development strategy, because even though everyone's different, they're all different in the same ways. There are patterns, just like there are in a process of selling a car, there are patterns in developing a human being. And so you need, essentially, if I can give you 3 basic things you need as an organization to change, is you need the belief first. You as a leadership team need to come to the conviction, and this is what I refer to as my Mission 22 statement. Mission 22, Glenn, is that until the store averages 22 cars per person, your store is broken. Your retail front end is broken if your store does not average 22 cars per person as a team average. So if you have 10 people, you should be selling 220 cars. And you can do the math however you want to do the math, but if it doesn't equal 22 cars per person, your store is broken. Now, when I first say that in a room full of managers or dealers at a convention or a conference or one of my own events, people go, what? And I go, I get it. I know you don't believe yet, but let me tell you, I've been in 3,000 dealerships in 7 countries and 3 continents. I can just tell you, my friend, I've seen things you haven't seen. So, but the first step is belief. You as a leadership team have to believe your people deserve the dignity of a deal a day. You have to believe your people deserve to truly be successful and come home with their head high because they produced a result. You have to believe that it's even borderline unethical and immoral to let people continue to sell 8, 10, and 12 and 15 cars a month when they're there 22 and 25 days a month. It's wrong.
And there for 10 hours a day.
Yeah, it's terrible. The math on it's horrendous. So, step 1 is belief. The next step is a blueprint. You as a dealership, either collectively or bring somebody like me, obviously, in who has these, but you have to come up with a blueprint that says, if it were true that a year from today, our store average was 22, if that was a true statement, if we could go to our 20 group composite and show them this is real, what would be the blueprint to get that? What would be the map? What would that look like? And what decisions would we have to intentionally and calculated make in order to get there if that was a true statement? And then that blueprint begins to now birth the behaviors, which is the third component. You need to then decide what are the non-negotiable behaviors that we will no longer tolerate being skipped, or we will from now on indoctrinate into our people that are part of our culture. What are the critical and core behaviors mapping in consistently with the blueprint that's aligned with our core new belief? That's what you need as a culture. And then as an individual salesperson, and if I was coaching a salesperson right now, I would tell the salesperson they need 3 things. And here's the 3 things you need as an individual salesperson. Number 1 is you need to build systems around everything that makes you successful. The average salesperson has no systemology. They have no systemization of any kind. They wing it too much. They're artists instead of scientists. You need to become a scientific artist. You need to start studying what makes you successful and build a system around the way you follow up, a system around the way you respond to emails, a system around the way that you handle objections or questions. You need to systematize your day. So step 1 for a sales individual, systems. Step 2, opportunities. You must generate and create your own opportunities. You cannot be a parasite on the dealership. You cannot be a parasite. Depending on the lifeblood of the store is not a model for success. So you need to become somebody who systematizes opportunity generation. You need to start looking at and measuring the quality of your month, not just the quantity. See, Glenn, if you sold 20 cars in a month and I sold 20 cars in a month, we both had a 20 car month. Most stores would say, man, I love having a 20 car person. But see, Glenn, what if everybody you sold was a repeat, or referral, or somebody you self generated through marketing, and everyone I sold was a BDC lead? You see, we both had a 20 car month, but they weren't the same month. Not only in cost to the dealership, they weren't the same, but in income, they probably weren't the same. And certainly in quality of life, they weren't the same. I had to convince strangers for a whole month. You get
Right.
to work with friends for a whole month. So systems, then opportunities. And the final piece is the work ethic. You have to develop a certain work ethic, which is both when I'm at work, I'm there to work. And while I'm working, I'm refining with efficiency the things that I'm doing so that I don't have to take the same amount of time to do the task that I did last week this time, because I've done it more than once. And when you do that, we have students who are part of our Pinnacle Society, Glenn, and I could pull up the screenshots and show you all day long of salespeople who sell more cars working less. One of my students who sold 52 cars last month only did it on 19 work days. Recently had a 57 car month. We did it on 18 work days. The reality is, if you do this right, you could build a business model where, as an individual salesperson, you could sell 30 cars a month working 3 days a week, or 40 cars a month working 4 days a week. But you have to build systems, you have to generate opportunities, and you have to develop a work ethic, all in order to build a business that'll one day work as hard for you as you work for it.
As you
And
can see,
those
I'm fidgeting because I want to jump in, but I wanted to
are
because here's the thing. Everything you just said, I believe wholeheartedly, because I'm in dealerships and and I don't do what you do, but I see wasted time all around me. And I hear frustrations from everybody. And now again, I love dealers, and so do you. And we're none of this is to point fingers and say you're bad people. It's just someone in there has not thought what you just put through, where or questioned, why didn't we sell a car today? And usually the answer is make more calls or do, and so I had this conversation yesterday. I was in a dealership and we were talking about this topic came up, and he said, well, I need my people to make all these calls. But one of my top salespeople, he doesn't want to do it. And I said, okay, but what are you having him call? And he's like, well, I'm just giving him orphan leads. I was like, well, I said, with all due respect, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I was like, why would you do that? He's like, well, I need these leads called. I'm like, but don't you have new people who don't have a book of business that maybe they could do? I said, why aren't you asking and again, sometimes I hear you, because what you always say, you're not asking the right question. How many appointments did that person generate through referrals? He goes, I don't know. I said, well, that's a better question. So I want to touch on this because I think your perspective on this is always spot on. But when I heard you saying about the three things that the dealership has to do, and they're going to say, yeah, it sounds great, John. 20 cars, my people are, so we're going to double our productivity. We don't have enough leads.
Yeah, of course.
Or salespeople are going to go, I need leads, or these leads are bad, because I always hear that. You've heard that forever too. So I want you to address this idea of, before we get to process, because the other part was I could hear people go, well, wait a minute, John said systems, but he said processes are not the best. We'll address that. But this idea of leads,
Yeah.
because I see people, again, like you're saying, everybody's waiting for new leads to come in for us to sell. And our good friend Troy Spring, owner of Dealer World, always said, and he said this, and I was like, that's the clearest way I could address that. So I steal it all the time. Is he said, your database, treat it like an asset. Like, you don't buy a house and ignore your house and then bitch that you didn't get increased value. So why you've spent, to your point, a dealership 10 years has spent millions of dollars on marketing to get tens and hundreds of thousands of names. And all we're worried about is, did we get another 500 in new? And you're going, but what'd you do with all these people? Well, I need new leads. So it is that mentality. So when you talk about creating opportunities, one, a dealer going, I need more leads. So it's a mentality at the top. And then also from a salesperson, they're going to go, well, who the heck am I supposed to call, John?
Oh, of course. Yeah. So to the dealer, let me speak to you first. I didn't come up with this expression, but I believe it's true. It goes something like this. Advertising is the tax you have to pay on delivering an unremarkable experience. And I would
Hold
also
on,
add,
say that again, because that's
yeah,
great.
advertising is the tax you have to pay on delivering an unremarkable experience. And I would also say, and I said this recently to a dealer the other day, I said, look, the longer you're in business, the less you should have to pay people to do business with you. Right? I mean, there's something wrong that you've been in business as long as you have, and you still have to pay the public to take you seriously. Like,
And but to your point is, I will bet you, and every dealer out there who's listening to this, or every manager, because this came up at dinner the other night with the dealer principal and his family and things like that. They talked about a person that he he has a side hobby and a bunch of his friends help him and things like that. And one of the people has, over the 10 years or 15 or 20 years that he's done business with that dealership, he has either himself purchased or family or influenced. They said the other day it was the 95th car, 95 cars that this person either personally bought for himself, his business, or sent people there. And my question to him was, how many of them do you have? And he goes, well, only a few. And again, this was an introduction to dealer, so I didn't say it, but I think that hits your point. Why don't you have hundreds of those people?
yes.
If your experience and you treated them beyond transactional that one time to get, like you said, those 20 that BDC, that might be great, but now what?
Now what? Yeah.
Right.
So let me try to address that a couple of ways. First of all, you're exactly right, and Troy's exactly right, that you have this database, right? So data mining and data nurturing and data care is really important. But let me answer the question first to the salesperson. So let's say, for example, you're a salesperson, you're watching this, and I don't know how you got on this podcast, but someone sent it to you or you clicked on it, and now you're at this point and you're going, please help me.
Mm-hmm.
To the salesperson who's starting from absolute zero, let me start from I'm zero. I have zero leads, zero CRM opportunities. I have zero. The very first thing I would say to that person is you actually don't have a zero database, because in this device called your phone, you have a contact list. And what I find fascinating is, and I do this as a challenge. This is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek challenge, but it's designed to get them to become self-aware. I say, here's what I want to do. I'm going to randomly scroll through your contact list and I'm going to call somebody. When they answer, I'm going to say, can you tell me what Glenn Pasch is doing these days? And can you tell me what, where he works and how he could help you these days? And for everyone who answers correctly to those questions, I will pay you $1,000. Okay. But for everyone who says, I honestly don't know, you have to pay me 100. So you have 10 to 1 odds on your favor. Do you want me to scroll through and tap that? Everyone who says no, you owe me 100. To this day, no one wants to do that. Why? Because in their database, their own personal database of their own phone, which has 300 contacts or 500 contacts, they know in their heart of hearts that if I randomly just call somebody, most people in their phone actually don't know what they're doing yet. So if you're a brand new salesperson, you say, I have nothing yet. You do. You have your phone list. Then the same thing would apply to your social media. Most of you would have a DM list on your Facebook account.
Can I just pause you for a quick second and then I'll let you get back? But what about people who are not brand new? Do you think, because I ran across this with a person who was at the dealership for 5 years, and I asked them that question, almost because I know you've always said that after 3 years you shouldn't have to take new leads. He said, I don't want people to know what I do. Like, it was the most mind-boggling statement that I ever heard. So I'm not sure I think it's also to your point, this is not, I just want to clarify, this is not just for the brand new person. No. How many people, salespeople, I don't care if you're 5 years into it, would you be able to take Jonathan's challenge?
Well, I'll go one step further and tell you a funny story about one of my dear friends who's a Pinnacle Society member, Benny Mido. Now, Benny, if you happen to watch this stream, I'm calling you out, brother, but you know I love you. Benny came to our Pinnacle Society Mastermind retreat. He came because his owner said, Benny, I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. But prior to the actual showing up, Benny called me. He says, "Hey, my owner said that I should go to your thing." And he says, "I'm number 3 in the nation for Nissan. I'm number 3." And he says, "My owner wants me to come learn from you. What can I learn from you? I'm number 3 of all Nissan salesmen in the country," right? Which is effectively the world, right? So I'm number 3. He says, "What am I going to learn from you?" And I said, "Honestly, Benny, I don't know." I said, "I don't know, but you said you're number 3." I said, "Would you like to be number 1?" He said, "Well, let me tell you something. I'm in Metairie, Louisiana." He said, "Number 1 and number 2 of the nation are always East or West Coast. It's always been that way. There's somewhere California or Florida. No one has ever been in first or second place unless they live out there. I'm in Metairie, Louisiana." I said, "Okay." He says, "I'm also Nigerian." I said, "Okay." And he has a very thick accent, by the way. I don't want to mimic him, but you get the idea. He says, "John, my accent's so thick, I have a hard time understanding what I'm saying." I said, "Okay." So "So here I am, this Nigerian guy in Metairie, Louisiana, and I'm 3rd in the country." He says, "So, what can you do for me?" I said, "Benny, you didn't answer my question. Do you want to be number 1? You told me the reasons why you can't be. Do you want to be?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Is everything you're doing right now everything you know to do?" He said, "Yes." I said, "And that's getting you to 3rd place. Okay. So do you want to be a number 1?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "Come to the thing, see what happens." So he shows up. At the event, here's what we found out about Benny. Benny, coming from Nigeria, his tribe in Nigeria, as he immigrated, when he came here, he came as a law student. He actually graduated top of his class in Tulane University. And he, on his timeline, if you look to his Facebook timeline, it still says he's a lawyer. There's not a single mention, Glenn, anywhere on his entire timeline of being a car salesman. And I said, I said, "Ben, what's going on here?" And he says, "Back in Nigeria, being a car salesman is considered a low-class citizen. Being a lawyer is considered a high-class citizen. So I don't want my family back in Nigeria to know that I'm a car salesman." I said, "You're number 3 in the world, and you're ashamed of it." He says, "Yeah, I think I am." So we had a mental breakthrough because he had to change his psychology. He went home, changed his profile, updated his thing. The very next year, I'm not saying it's the only contributing factor. The very next year, congratulations, Benny, number 1 in the nation. And Benny, if you go to his timeline now, but the guy
Everything's
sells.
about cars.
Everything's about selling cars. But think about that, Glenn. Not just a guy who's been selling cars for 5 years in some obscure place and he sells Hyundais and he's ashamed of, he doesn't let his network know. Imagine being 3rd place in the world and still not wanting people to know.
Right.
And so, yes, you as an individual person, whether it's your phone, your Facebook, your natural network and spheres of influence, you have to get the word out that you're there to serve and help people. But then let me just do some math for somebody who's been selling cars for 3 years. Let's just do 3 years. It's very basic math. And this will mess with every manager who's watching this. Get ready to really have like nightmares for the next 2 nights. What I'm about to show you, my friend, is going to give you a headache and a migraine. But hang with me and I'll show you. I'm the Excedrin of the car business. I'll take that headache away. But watch this. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to just take a really simple situation of somebody selling cars for 3 years and an average salesperson 12 cars a month. So let's just do some basic math. And I've got my calculator here. You can follow along at home if you want to. But I'm just doing 12 cars a month times 12 months is 144. And I'm going to do that times 3. So that's going to get me now.
Uh-oh. You froze? Jonathan?
132. So over a 3-year, 32 cars. Now, Glenn, I don't know that you've ever seen this math. Then I'm going to ask you what you think I'm doing. Yes?
Yep. Go ahead.
Oh, did I lose you?
Yeah, no. Go ahead. Go back
Am I
to,
back?
yeah, go back. We can cut. Go back to 12 cars times 12.
Yeah, 12 cars times 12 is 144. We're doing that times 3 years, which is going to get us 432.
Okay.
That's 432 total sales over a 3-year period. Okay. Now let's take that number, and here's what I'm going to do. And Glenn, you tell me if you know where I'm going with the math on this, but I'm going to take that number times 2.5.
Okay.
That's going to be 1,080. Now I'm going to take that number and I'm going to subtract the original total we had, which is 432. That gives me 648. Now follow the math for a second. Everybody's trying to do this at home. I took the total sales over 3 years, which was 432. I took that number times 2.5. So whatever your number is at home, do your number of total sales over 3 years times 2.5. Then subtract your original total. In this case, subtracting 432 gets me 648. Now we're almost there. We're going to do that times 0.03. And we're going to hit go. Okay, now the final number I have is 19 and a half. Now, Glenn, unless you've seen this, you wouldn't know exactly what I'm doing. but let me kind of walk you through what I'm doing. So, what was the starting number? How many total households he sold a car to in 3 years? 432 households.
432.
Now, the 2.5, where's that number coming from? Well, that is the number of vehicles on average per household. So, there's 2.5 cars per household on average. So, that's what gets me 1,080. There's 1,080 total vehicles represented out of the 432 cars I've sold. Now, I'm going to back out the original number, which was 432. Why? Because I know exactly what those cars are out of the 1,080 because I'm the one who put them there. So I have 1,080 minus the original number of my total, which is 432, gives me this new balance, which was 648. Now, what is 648? According to Sellchology, that's what I call mystery mobiles. These are cars, not the Scooby-Doo van. These are cars parked next to
The one you sold.
648 of them. What is the 0.03? That is the average number of people in the marketplace shopping for a car at any given time. So if you went to a Walmart and if you just asked 100 random people, are you actively right now thinking of replacing your car? On average, 3 out of 100 are actively thinking about replacing their car. 3 out of 100. So that means out of the 648 cars parked next to a car I've sold, on average, every month, 19 and a half of them are being replaced this month. Now, here's my question I ask the salesperson who's been selling cars for 3 years, so sells 12 cars a month. I say there's 19.5 of those cars being replaced this month. Do you know what they are? Do you know who's driving them? Do you know what they want next? And here's what's really sad, Glenn, about this. Imagine, for example, let's say I'm a Hyundai salesman and I just sold you a Hyundai Santa Fe, okay? And your daughter really thinks Nissan Rogues are cute. And 3 months from today, she's starting to talk about she wants a Nissan Rogue. So you say, okay, let's go look at Nissan Rogues. Your first thought after buying your Hyundai Santa Fe from me is not, you know who we should call about a Nissan Rogue? We should call the Hyundai salesman. That's not your first thought. Your first thought is, let's look at some Nissan Rogues. And so you'll go maybe to the Nissan dealership to look at a Rogue, and then you start looking at the pricing on some of the new ones and go, I don't know if I want to spend that. And you'll switch to a used Nissan Rogue at the Nissan store, all the while at my dealership where I sold you the Santa Fe
Correct.
6 months ago. You know what I have sitting on my lot? I have Nissan Rogues.
Of course.
But of course, I didn't know that your daughter was going to need a new car. And you didn't know that I could be the guy who could sell her the car. And so how many deals like this are leaking through your pipelines, leaking through your database daily, weekly, monthly? If you're a manager, just take the total volume of the average store's volume. Let's say, for example, just for fun, because we're just going to mess with people right now. We're going to drive some people nuts, okay? We're going to say we're a store that we sell 150 cars a month. We're going to do that times 36 months. It's 3 years of sales. It's 5,400 total sales. We're going to do that times 2.5. That's 13,500. We're going to subtract out my original number that I had, which was 5,400, and that gives me 8,100 vehicles parked next to just the last 3 years of business. Take that times 0.03. This month alone, there are 243 vehicles parked next to the vehicles that we sell as a store that only sells 150 cars a month. So as a store that only sells 150 cars a month, 243 cars are parked next to cars you've sold that are going to be swapped out this month. Do you know what they are? Do you know who's driving them? Do you know what they want? No. My goodness, when you do the math, it is absurd that dealers continue to throw money in the air, hoping it'll land on a customer who wants to do business with you. And again, I didn't come up with this phrase. John Wanamaker famously said, the problem with advertising is half the money I spend on it is wasted, and I just don't know which half.
But it goes back to what you were talking about, systematizing and having a strategy, because when people ask me, well, who should I call? And like I said, I'm nowhere near the expert you are, but I ask the simple questions of, well, when was the last time you talked to the people that you sold? Like I would even say, I went a different route. I said, okay, let's say you sold 10 cars, 120 just this year or over the past year. I said, I bet you all of them have 3 close friends that they probably know if they're in the market. And I'm like, that's 360 people that possibly, and why aren't you calling those people checking in? So, and then you go, well, what about service? What about this? What about that? There's so many buckets to go fishing in, but
Yeah.
everybody's just looking out the window to go, what's new?
Yeah, if I just take just the database mining portion, which is just what I showed you right now, literally just cars parked next to cars I've sold. You saw the math on that. We're not even calculating in the service customer who comes through. We're not
Sure.
even calculating in the referral. We're not even calculating in how a salesperson can become the official salesman to a community or to an organization. Like my students literally become the official salesman to entire apartment complexes. So an apartment complex may have 300 units in it, right? Which means it has 450 cars parked in the parking lot, right? Which means 12 of those cars are being swapped out every single month. 12. The average salesman does not have access to a database of 12 buyers every month off of just one apartment complex, not to mention becoming the official salesman for a hospital or other things that my
Or
students do,
your church, or that's
or
what I like I've said to people.
countless others.
Yeah, I'm like, it goes back to, does people know? I said, does everyone at your church know? Does everyone in your softball league? Does do all the people that your spouse works with?
Yes, thank you.
No. Like it's this idea of and it's a great way to round this out. I remember my father, people always saw pictures when we were young and the different cars, and they said, and looking back at it, I said to my father when, 10 years ago when I got into this, I said, why one time is there an Oldsmobile in there and then there's a Ford and then there's a like, why did you change? And he said, because I bought from Jonathan. So when Jonathan went from Pontiac to Oldsmobile, guess what
Spot
we drove?
spot
We
on.
drove Oldsmobiles. And
Right.
it always stuck with me. And same thing, we always took our car to be serviced by that guy. And we bought bread from that bakery. And so it's a nice way to sort of circle what you're saying here, is that why aren't you that person
That's
for
right.
all your friends, family, neighbor, community, to be that trusted person that if they have a question about a vehicle or need to, like you said earlier, as we started that friction, they're calling service because they have a problem. Why can't you become the problem solver for all of those people versus I have to go convince a stranger? And I think that's such a beautiful way to talk about sales, is why are you not that trusted person in your network, your community, that could help somebody versus I have to go knock on a door and convince you to buy a car from me, which is the easier path. I think we all are missing that for some reason. It's just a wonderful, wonderful way to look at it.
Well, Glenn, I have a phrase. In fact, it's one of my mantras. I'm out of the convincing business, and I tell people get out of the convincing business as fast as possible. Like if you're still doing the same job for a year and you still have to convince people, you've been doing it wrong, my friend. I'm sorry, you've just been
Right. You
doing it
need to,
wrong.
you get in a helping business.
Yeah. So now I want to switch gears slightly, and I don't want to monopolize the time. I know we have to wrap it up, but I want to just kind of again for those who are in charge. Now what, right? What do I do? Gosh, John, this is all great stuff, but I have people. I just don't know if they have the drive. I don't know if they have the whatever. I don't know that I have the right people for that. Maybe, maybe, and maybe. I don't know. But here's what I know. Again, you're in charge. So what are you gonna do about it? Well, one thing that I encouraged, just like in my training of process, the experiential side of the sale, is look for patterns. One thing that you should also look for is, here's this pattern. The team I have is this way. Well, let's go one step before that. Before they were part of your team, they were a candidate or a prospective candidate for your team, right? They were an interviewee before they became part of the team. So what I also would want to have managers do is go, what is your recruiting? What is your hiring and selection process? What is your interview process? What is all of that doing to pre-filter out the people that would be less likely to do what you're asking for? I want to give you a quick story about this that I think will help. I had a BDC manager who I was at the store and she says, John, I really need your help. So glad you're here. She said, one of my biggest challenges right now is getting my team to send videos. I just want them to send more videos. I want them to just reply with video, send videos of the cars, video confirmations. So what did I do? She's like, I went and got webcams for every station. I even got a software that allows us to create videos on the fly from your phone, whatever. It's really easy. She's like, I even show them the videos that I make. I've even showed them the responses from the videos we send out so they can see it. She says, I hired 3 new people and I can't get them to do any videos. And they just started and I can't. So what do I do? How do I fix this? And I said, I said, listen, any challenge that you have, any problem challenge that you have, there's always two options: handle it in the moment or pre-handle it. So let me just talk about being proactive for a second. I said, can you pull up the ad that you used that your most recent 3 hires responded to? Can you pull up the ad so I can read the ad? So we pulled it up and we're looking at the ad. I said, now I'm going to look for one word in the entire ad. Okay, I'm just going to look for one word. Now, Glenn, it's not a trick question, but it can be tricky. Do you know what word I'm going to look for?
Video.
Here's what she said, and it's okay. She said, trainability, no. Coachability, drive, no. Motivation, no. I said, no. I said, video. She went, oh dear God. She said, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I said, yeah. I said, am I going to find the word video in your ad? She's like, no. So I said, okay, so just to be clear, because I want to help you, but I got to hurt you first to help you first. Let me ask you something. So the one thing that you want them to do is video. The one request that you have is video. The one hope you have is video. But the word video is never mentioned once in the ad. So just to be clear, here's their pathway. On the ad, never was the word video. When I sent in my resume, you didn't ask me to send a video with it. When you got my resume, did you send me a video? She's like, no. So wasn't video in the ad? Video's not in the ad. Video wasn't what you asked me to do. You didn't send me a video. When I came in for the interview, did you have me shoot a video right then? No. I said, so if we wanted to,
or did you even to go simpler than that, did you even explain that part of their job was to shoot videos in the conversation? Like, you could have skipped all of the other ones, even though they shouldn't, but you said, let me explain something to you, Jonathan. Part of your job is sending out videos.
I know, but no, she didn't. So Glenn, so I asked her a question. I'll ask you the same question. I said, so to fix what you just described from happening ever again, how many times should the word video be in the ad? How many times would the word video be in the ad, Glenn?
At least 2 or 3.
10.
Okay.
Now, why? No, 10 is not 10. Whatever you think, do that times 5. Like, what if you thought, oh, I should do it, 2 times, 10, 3 times, 15 then. The point is, it should be the subject line.
Right.
A lead appointment setter specializing in video. And then the very first sentence, we send more videos than anyone else, which is why our team wins more than anyone else. Our customers love getting the videos custom and personalized from all of our people. We send out 100 videos a day on average per rep. And
that'll clarify it. Yeah.
Right. That ad had the word video 15 times in the first 2 paragraphs. And you did not want to send videos, would you respond to the ad?
Absolutely not. I think
no, and if the first thing it said is not send me a resume, but send me a video of your description, right? And then if the first thing you got was a video, and then when they came in, they pulled up as part of the interview, the very first thing, Glenn, here's the interview. Let me pull up this is the lead we just got. Can you go ahead and show me the video you would send? What would you send as your first video? She's just like, oh, I make my life so much harder on myself, don't I? I said, yeah, you and almost every other
almost everyone else. I think that's such a great way to land, is the fact that, taking that step back, like you said, and just think about how you've laid out what you want the job to be. Were you clear? It's one of those things that you've always said, which I've stolen from you, is, what you complain about is what you allow. So, but being able to backtrack upstream a bit to say, did I cause my own problem? So I love that. So listen, I could talk to you forever about this, but I really like how you've laid this out for people. At the end of it, I have 2 questions I ask people. So I want to ask you, and then we'll get all of your contact information, things like that. So because you're out there and everybody looks to you to inspire them and work on them and help them, what are you working on for yourself personally that a year from now you're going to say, I'm glad I invested the time in that for me?
Well, first of all, as a business operator, I mean, I'm constantly investing in myself as my skill set. I recently attended a big sales event summit, and I say the number only to give context to the willingness. It was a $25,000 ticket to get in the door. And so I'm willing to spend the money to develop my own skill set, my network, my abilities, and so forth. So I'm always looking for ways to just stretch my brain. On top of that, and this is not really a secret of the industry anymore because I've kind of talked about it, I'm buying a dealership myself, actively in the process of. So I have some LOIs out there, and I'm working on the final numbers. If everything dominoes correctly, it could be as early as mid-November. and I could have my own store. So I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is and my processes and the things I claim. I'm willing to extend my reputation out there beyond talking in theory. It's like, all right, you get to watch me do it. So I'm working on that, which is requiring a whole new set of skills, because obviously operating my own personal business and all the diverse aspects of my business is one thing. Building a dealership from scratch, from core values, mission statement, pay plans, and all the things that I'm working on now has really been it's been a fascinating and extremely excruciating process to try to figure out how to document all those things from all the best practice I've collected.
Right.
So I'm working on that too. So I would just say those are the things that have occupied my time. And then on a personal level, I'm a father of a 5-year-old and a husband to a woman who's put up with me for 29 years and married for 24. So I'm always just striving to make sure that I do things in a way that honors God, that honors my wife, honors my child, and my reputation in the marketplace. So, anything that makes me, makes them more proud of me matters.
Well, listen, I'm not even asking you another question because I think you just covered everything. And I really am so glad that we were able to do this. You are someone that I have a lot of respect for because the way you carry yourself, the way you do business, you are truly honorable. And I really like having that conversation. I'm so glad that you're here. So tell everybody how they can connect with you, where they can find you online.
Sure. So I like to say I'm all over the web like Spider-Man. You can't miss me if you're looking for me. So you can obviously just check out Sellchology, right? So that's Sellchology, Sellchology. If you Google that or Google my name, Jonathan Dawson, you find a bunch of resources there. Please follow me and find me all over the web that way. Obviously, from my website, sellchology.com, you can find our contact information. Look, I'm only looking for those that are looking for me. As I said, I got out of the convincing business a long time ago. I've built a business where I'm truly celebrated instead of merely tolerated, and I want to teach your team to do the same thing. So if you want a business where your people are empowered and educated to create raving fan advocates by out experiencing the competition, if you want that for your people, then that's the mission I'm on. I'm on a mission to save the world one salesperson at a time. And if that aligns with you, then we should talk.
Love that. Now that is the way you convince people to come talk to you. I like that. That's great. So audience, you know the drill. If you found something valuable in our discussion today, please share it out with your network. I know there's people in your network that would benefit from what Jonathan shared. The fact that you spent time with Jonathan and I know there's so much content out there that you could watch. The fact you shared any amount of our conversation means the world to me. So if you do like it, please make sure you like it. Like the podcast, share it out to others. We're here every single Tuesday with new episodes. We have a few more. I'm back in the studio. I'm really excited about that. And as I say at the end of every episode, you're in charge. But now Jonathan gave you a few more tools for your toolkit to help you become the leader that you want to be. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. See you next week, Jonathan. I look forward to seeing you in person.
Thanks, my friend.
Take care.